Well, so this is just a quote from a book that I read recently. So one thing that I'm afforded is as being part of a academic unit is I get to spend a lot of time thinking and reading. This happens to be from a book called Dead Mars, Dying Earth, and I was first introduced to Craig Thomas by a gentleman by the name of Steve Korek. He was the son, he is the son of the former president, or regional president of Champion International, and he's seen a lot of the destructive practices in the logging and timber industries, and has been a big proponent for the projects that I'm about to show you moving forward to heal the earth. And so like I said, I get a lot of time to think about these big picture things. When we get into the talk here, I'll first take a really big picture approach. I'll then look at a little bit of the carbon science that I'm starting to educate myself on. I'll also show you some of the technologies that we want to build that are relatively simple, relatively low tech, mostly off the shelf. Bob, Craig, and I were also very fortunate recently to meet a Canadian partner who was looking for a technology that could actually make his zero waste technology carbon negative. So again, getting back to that sort of burn, bury, build trio I talked about previously, they had CO2 going into the atmosphere. Right now, as we speak, British Columbia is scheduled to close 18 coal-fired power plants, and they need a way to still make energy and not pollute the air. So that's the solution that we think we can move towards here. The numbers are relatively large. Some of the folks that we're dealing with right now are actually in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of money coming out of the Fed right now. I don't know if you watched the Paris talks recently, but it seems like they went pretty well compared to years past, that a lot of the countries are like, okay, time to wake up, do the right thing. It sounds like there's also a lot of private money. We've got people like Bill Gates standing up and saying, hey, it's time to reinvest in the future. I think we've got a bright future ahead of us. So some of the numbers and the scales that we're looking at are quite big, and the time frames are quite short. We really like to get up and running as quickly as possible. Bob has processes to generate up to 50,000 tons of premium wood pellets annually. And I think the key here to realize is that we're not going after premium timber of days of yore. Almost everything you're going to see here is just picking up the scraps, all of these, the beetle kill, the things that become fire hazards every summer. I've sat down at length with Angela Farr at the USDA Forest Service in Missoula, and she'll ask, I asked her, what's the biggest obstacle to getting some of these forests cleaned up and the forest fires under control? We said usually the biggest obstacle is somebody like a James Taylor who thinks he's going to do the right thing, and once a large federal project gets funded, he'll come in and say, oh no, you can't go into the forest and cut down the trees, et cetera, et cetera. The solutions that we have are geared much more towards the responsible, sustainable forest management systems that Craig was just talking about.
So let me interrupt
Sure.
you. That's federal.
Federal, right.
And what happens is nobody has stepped forth with a solution. And when somebody as we develop our solution here, and it's going to have to come from private or tribal, not federal. Okay? And as soon as an example is implemented, that will change many of the beliefs and understanding. Continued operation at the status quo is unacceptable. We have to change some things.
What would be the feedstock required to develop 50,000 tons?
We need about 30 loads a day is what we need, and what we would request from the tribe is a sustained 12 loads a day, and we would purchase the rest on open market. We're not asking you to give it to us. We would purchase that, okay? And that's not premium timber. That's not to compete with the mills that you're currently. We're looking at the tops, the slash pulp, if they're not taking that old, dead, burnt, that kind of material.
we'll show you an example of some of those materials too.
Maybe just to mention that we've done a number of biomass feasibility studies
Oh, nice.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, one recently that was done in partnership with the the newly formed Energy Corporation that now runs Dam.
Energy
They're
Cares.
looking at developing a number of different scales of cogen facilities at the site. So
Oh, okay.
there's a lot of that front-end work available, not looking at timber products, but looking at a biomass feasibility.
One of our parts is a keynote here is we think fuel is not the direction to go with the fiber. It is much more valuable as carbon,
Mhm.
okay? Several times more valuable as carbon, okay? Utilizing as a fuel, I think
You've never made
that's old, okay? This is new. We need to get carbon back in the earth, as Brad will try to explain here, and the carbon has enormous uses. It's pharmaceutical. There's all kinds of things that can happen. And the wood as a board, or wood as a heat, is not where we're at. We're going to use the heat. First, we're going to use it as a filtering mechanism. Then we're going to use it as heat. Then we're going to make products out of it. We're going to use it at least 3 times, and then we're going to sell it as carbon.
Okay, and then the point too is obviously to create local jobs as well. So again, just looking at the big picture, I think there's been enough climate science going on that we don't really need to be educated into what's going on with our Earth's climate, but what we're going after is a way to take that CO2, the methane, as well as the NOx out of the atmosphere. So again, this is kind of some of your business as usual. Just get it done, make a big mess, make your money, and get out. This is the type of practice that we would like to get away from. This is another one. Incineration is just kind of old and dirty. A lot of the technologies that we're going to talk about have catalysts that take the CO2 and take it from the air and put it back into the earth. Now, again, as an academic, I get sent papers frequently. This one just came out, and the enormity of the problem became much more apparent to me. I wrote my first paper on energy and justice in 2008 when I sort of looked at our practices, heading halfway across the world to go guard oil fields that didn't belong to us. Tramsky et al. 2015 took a much longer range view on how much, not only how much current biomass we burn, but how much ancient biomass we burn. Some of the math that I do with my students shows that we are burning the Earth's stored biomass, and that's what coal, oil, and gas are. We're burning it at a rate 10 million times greater than nature put it there. And so the math problem that I give my students is to say, imagine you've got a rich aunt or uncle that gives you $1 a minute from the minute you're born. You're going to live to be 50 million minutes old on your 100th birthday. When do you get to retire? Well, at that 10 million to 1 ratio, you live for 50 minutes, you got 5 minutes. So we're right in the middle of that 5-minute party right before our 100th birthday. That's how quickly we're burning through these fossil fuel resources. So this particular graph shows the total phytomass, and that just means all of biology, where the sun comes in and sequesters carbon through photosynthesis. 2,000 years ago, we had 35 what are called zeta joules of this. Our human population on planet Earth burns a half a zeta joule of energy. We consume a half a zeta joule of primary energy each year. That's 500 exajoules. So as we continue to do so, the amount of biomass, of carbon available to us as a global civilization decreases. And so as you can see from this graph, we don't have a whole heck of a lot of time if we're going to continue with business as usual. This one too shows at year 0, at that rate of consumption, we had 68,000 years left. As we progress and continue to consume, that number diminishes. Oh, thanks. This little blip right here on the curve, you might imagine was the plague. You know, when there weren't as many people around to go through the phytomass that we have. We're now 1960, 1970, so we have less than 1,000 years worth of these resources left. The only good news that I can see from these curves is at least it's going this way. And I don't think I don't think I included here, but one thing we are starting to see that as the Earth's population continues to increase and our rate of energy consumption also remains high, we're now at the first point in our global civilization where there's really less energy per person to go around. That can be the result of two things. Either we're becoming more efficient, which would be the right way, or there are people living in poverty that don't have access to as much energy, which in our opinion is the wrong way to go about it. So the one bit of good news that we can see from this curve is at least it might eventually start to flatten out, and we need to really get ahead of this curve. Okay, so we came up, so I've shown you the problems, and as I mentioned previously, the program that I direct at Missoula College is just sort of one of a three-legged stool, if you will. There's the problem part that I just showed you. That's the Steve Runnings out there showing the climate change and the bad news. There's the policy part, which I think we just saw in Paris. The politicians meeting to say what's the next policy, and then our energy technology program is there to provide the solutions. So we're that third leg of the tripod. So the burden really is upon us now. We've seen the problems. We see what the policies are. Now let's see what the solutions might be. We mentioned zero waste previously, so we've also talked a lot about forest cleanup. The beetle kill that's out there, we'll turn that into wood chips, as we said previously. And so rather than simply burning this for energy, as we said before, we can make electricity. If it goes through the boiler, here comes electricity. There are gases that come out. Some of these are commercially viable gases. Other ones you just want to sequester. The technology I'm going to show you shortly is a biofilter reactor. So we've come up with an actual living filter, similar to the algae technologies you might have seen before, where the algae systems will breathe in the CO2 and take it from a gaseous phase back into a living phase. Clean emissions come out. I'll show you the results, some more preliminary results from the emissions. And here's where some of the value comes in. So raw carbon and biochar, this can go into agriculture once it's been charged or turned into a living system. And again, there's zero waste here. So some of the outputs, if you've got CO2 coming out, that can go right into the greenhouse. Same thing with heat. Other nutrients can go to the pond. And schools and other institutions, we're trying to scale this to the size of college campuses, hospitals, prisons, etc., where there's also food waste. Ultimately, it's a closed system. It's an integrative approach, and that's what we've been focusing on from the beginning.
How do you bring, when you go about
Sure.
the charged biochar, then how do you apply that into the agricultural uses?
So there several people are using that around the state. So Algae Aquatech is making this. I've got another student, Mark Broston, has been making it on his farm. And I think has Brian Jackson been using some of it too?
He has not used any.
He hasn't
He's
used it
used
yet?
some of the fertilizers, but he hasn't with the biochar.
Right.
Maybe what happens is if you put the carbon naked, raw carbon, with the plant, it absorbs the nutrients. The plant go into stress for a couple of years until the carbon collects enough nutrients to start giving it back. But if you activate or charge the jar, then it can immediately communicate with the plant and give it back stuff. And some of the studies that I'm familiar with are up to 17% increased production simply, no changes except charged carbon.
So we get just like farming, you're talking farming.
Exactly,
not
just
necessarily for cows and ranching.
That will probably be somewhere down the line because there are other higher value uses pharmaceuticals and other things that can use the carbon and other things, and filtering mechanisms in waste and those kind of things. It's tremendous for filtering materials.
But yeah, this charged biochar just goes right back in the soil, and then you've got that nice, deep, rich, dark soil to work with again, rather than the depleted soils.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned cattle ranching and stuff just now, there have been studies done in this field, especially with the technology we're going to be utilizing, that 1% mix of this biochar, after it's activated in a cattle feed, will not only cut down on the emissions the cattle makes belching in
Oh, that's right.
the other end, yeah, but it also cuts down on their immunizations considerably, like 90-some%. And that's, it's gonna be, because there are gonna be some projects going on with this technology that will be certified completely organic, because of this technology
There's a system.
helping out.
There's a sister activity that will launch it when we're funded, that will happen in another place, that will be the agricultural portion of this. It's about the same size as what this project would be, to have organic cattle.
So again, I think we've got a great opportunity here where there's another company out of Canada that has a test facility already up and running in Korea, and what they're really looking for is a partner to take the CO2 waste from their system and then put it back into the biochar
So
products that we
partnered
mentioned.
together here, our filter works very well with that, with the biomass. Our test, I found that works very well. So they had a secret. We were afraid of the other pyrolysis that existed because they basically made gunpowder, and that's a serious problem. It can take over itself. So you don't, well, like what you said, there is no place that builds dry char that can get insurance. because
Exactly. Any technology out in the pyrolysis field right now, 98% of them are a dry process. And when you produce a powder, the carbon powder, like Craig says, you're producing the main ingredient of gunpowder. So we not only had to find a way to utilize high moisture content biomass, but we wanted to keep it in basically what I'm considering a slurry form to activate and then it's easy to just press dry and run through a pelletizer. So it still has a moisture content.
So what
But,
happened with that?
yeah, you can't get all these pyrolysis plants going on around the country and around lots of parts of the world. They have to self-insure, so you're actually putting up a bunch of money to build something that could blow up and nobody's gonna pay you back for it. But we won't have that problem at all.
So plus we can use the water to get done with it.
Exactly.
Get most of the catalyst back. So we solved, it's a kind of a sister thing. They had a pollution problem that we can solve. We had an explosion problem that they can solve. When you marry the two together, you now have a system.
Plus, what comes out of our filter can go right back in
To
the
their system.
process. So it is a zero waste.
Right, so again, this is just an overview of the company out of Vancouver, showing some of the products. This is again a fuel product, so this would be a competitor for coal. It's still carbon based, but on pushing 90 to 95% carbon, and thus the much higher BTU value. The sulfurs out of it, the mercuries out there aren't the heavy metals that you see in coal. So we just took a snapshot of a plant. This might be the size that we would scale to, ultimately taking what we saw previously in Korea and getting up to something of about this size. We're also very fortunate that we've got a partner in Corvallis. So our other partner, Brian Jackson, is just recently purchased a 50,000 square foot set of greenhouses. So again, any CO2 that does leak from the system can be pumped into there. The electricity, the heat can all run that, so we're able to have a greater food yield year-round rather than relying on what Mother Nature gives us. And again, when I mentioned off-the-shelf components, the filter itself is relatively simple. So you see a lot of that waste wood that we were mentioning previously, so leaf, branch. There is some biochar in there. We mentioned this is a living system. It's a living filter. The sawdust and the other wood chips allow it to maintain a nice surface area to volume ratio, just like you see in any sponge or filter, so lots of surface area for the chemical reactions to take place on.
The testing that we've done with this has been very positive, and we're just looking at, this is a commercial scale-up.
Right. So this has been running, again, on Craig's, and if you get a chance, you should read this book. You can go, if next time you're at the university bookstore, take a look at the local authors section. A lot of fun to
Oh,
read.
and another point is that in the current budget, we did not put in for the greenhouse. We were gonna get through with the pilot plant. That would be the next stage, so that's unfunded at this time. That's someplace we really need to go, but to get started, we have to start somewhere.
So just one quick example. This is just showing the, without the filter in place, all of the gases are just heading up into the atmosphere, soot, ash, etc. Smelly and an issue. You can't do this type of operation in Missoula, for example. But once the filter is in place, with the effluent coming through here, and I think I've got a shot of that here shortly. With the effluent coming through here instead, you get the same heat, the same energy, with almost no particulate matter coming out. So we have done some gas analysis in this first little chart right here. You can see that once the effluent has gone through the filter, you're able to capture more heat. And if you ever burned wood in a fireplace, everyone says, well, gosh, half the heat comes out the chimney. Well, there it was, but once it's gone through the filter, you're able to recapture a much more efficient burn process. There's more oxygen in the effluent once it's gone through the filter. We've taken out a lot of the carbon monoxide, a lot of the carbon dioxide, and this NOx issue is something that's under further investigation. So when you burn too hot, you get a lot of NOx emissions. If you're sort of burning in that just right range, you get less. So this, in our opinion, is sort of a matter of fine-tuning the process, hitting steady state, and that's why you see the large variation in the NOx emissions. But again, we taking out all these tars and particulates that are terrible for air quality. If you run hot enough, just like you would in a coal-fired power plant, you can make steam from it and then generate electricity.
There's some interesting new turbines coming out too. They're really.
Well, they've been on the
Well,
market
they're
now
on-
about 10 years, but there's a couple of outfits, and one's really come a long way, working with GE and a couple other companies. But they take old Huey helicopter engines and Chinook helicopter engines, and this unit represented here is a 1 megawatt power generation system. They also, with the Chinook engine, they rated at 2.5 megawatts, but it actually creates up to 3.3 megawatts of power, relatively inexpensively off the steam generated.
So here's another shot of the greenhouse showing that it can be integrated for heat, electricity, as well as CO2 utilization.
When you get down to the filter, when it warms up, that's about the temperature that you need in the greenhouse. Well, if you just have a greenhouse around the filter, you get free heat. Well, I guess nothing's free.
So we were talking a little bit about the mill site. Maybe, Bob, you want to talk this line a little bit?
My familiarity with this, we have the main buildings here. Right, where's the rail coming in? Boy, that's not a good picture. But we will have the railroad being utilized. They will come in and rebuild it. We can, it's been proven, not only through the science, but with the technology in Korea. They have utilized creosote technology and everything. We can clean up, we can get rid of railroad ties that there's mountains of all over this state and many others. So we're not too worried about the railroad coming in and getting their tracks relayed if they have some place to drop off their timber. But kind of what we had envisioned is also having approximately 5 acres in here to utilize the greenhouse setup. And you know, Mike, I've been doing a lot of thinking about something you had mentioned last week about your solid wastewater treatment. You know, you guys have a great plan on how you handle your stuff right now, but don't you have a lot of problems with microbial issues and things like that? With our technology, we can not only show you how to carbonize that and be able just to spread out water and not waste all this stuff. And we made a little joke, you made a little joke last week, if you remember what it was. You know, we've taken enough shit off the white man. Because Evergreen and Kalispell and everybody else wants to build a pipeline and send their stuff down to you. If I can show you how to make $50 or $100 million a year and taking that shit off the white man, how would that make you feel?
So eloquent.
All right. So I did mention that my program is partnered with the Blackfeet, and we were very fortunate recently to get the news that one of my students is getting a NASA scholarship to build a rocket stove, and we thought it was kind of interesting that NASA's, well, they build rockets, but now they're going to fund us to build a rocket stove. With this, we're also going to be able to optimize some of our combustion processes. So just, in fact, today, we're putting the purchase order in for our own 5-gas analyzer. My teaching assistant right now is building this. I don't have a slide for it, but just a few weeks ago, we went in and put a solar thermal air exchanger built mostly from soda cans, put it on the house of a gentleman who had just built his own house, living with his daughter and their newborn, and really trying to get off, just walk the walk, get off of the fracking grid, get off of the oil, get off of the coal, and go to 100% renewables. And so a technology like this, relatively little wood going in, you get a lot of heat, and again, all of that is stored in this thermal mass with a very, very modest exhaust vent. This would go through the biofilter reactor that I showed you before, and we could, take it to at least a carbon neutral process. So lots of opportunities here from what we've seen. So you asked a little bit in terms of what the mass throughput is. This is what we came up with in terms of input. Do you want to talk to this one a little bit, Craig?
Sure.
I think you know the numbers.
Basically, what we're talking about is that to get us going, we need some biomass. So we would be asking if there was some kind of a long-range purchase agreement where we could purchase 12 or 15 loads of biomass from the tribal forestry, and then we would get the other 50% from open market, and then that would allow us to have a solid resource to work from. And when we're funded, that's the direction that we're going to go. Basically, if you operate harvesting 250 days a year, there's about 94,000 tons, and if you operate the plant at 300 days a year, there's about 31,000. The ratio is about 3 to 1 on your conversion for the carbon, and the pellet is similar on that. The pellet you would chip here, so you're not going to get residuals from a sawmill, so we wouldn't be getting into that arena, which is difficult. We would make our own, separate it with an air separator, and then utilize the cellulose of the tree for the pellets.
So,
And the one other thing I just wanted to mention while we were on this subject of the pellets is you had mentioned there's a lot of issues of gathering firewood for a lot of the members of the tribe during the year. Well, I believe if working together, and we do locate here, if the tribe wanted to supply pellet stoves to some of these people that you wanted to help take care of, we would actually give you pellets for everybody you needed at cost plus 10.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. When I was in Bethesda, Maryland, I shared with you guys at the National Institute for Health and Biomedical Research. One of the presentations talked about, the burning of wood, and some of the tribes are actually gathering. They have a program where they go gather wood and make sure that it's dried, and because a lot of us, and myself included, I've cut down Red and Dead, and they weren't quite
Yeah,
dry, and I told you guys I like to throw a couple of those pieces in every night because they burn longer,
Yeah.
but they don't burn as hot.
Mhm.
So there's tribes and other people that are looking for high quality, they developing some high quality or making sure that the wood is dried properly before they distribute it to like elder programs or whatever. But I think if we did something like that, it would cut down on the air pollution.
And health issues.
And indoor health issues, because there is, their EPA is doing a bunch of stuff with tribes in the Southwest and other areas that are using actually coal in their wood stoves. And the emissions that are coming out in their house and other places, a lot of the old people, the old folks, they don't have these, catalytic,
Right.
$1,500 or $2,000-3,000 stove in their house.
Yep.
They have an old cook stove or
Right.
an old, what are those old things called? We don't even know if they're properly installed, how much emissions are coming out in their homes.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing, and that's what some of the medical research people are looking at. And I think I shared with you guys, I went to it's in Raleigh, Durham, Research Triangle, where EPA does all of their, or pretty much all of their research in the scientific research. They're looking at different kind of stove, in all kind, there's all of this stuff that you
Right.
guys are talking about, they're doing it there.
Neat. Yeah, we have another colleague who's just invited to be part of the SUNY Brookhaven National Lab Stove Competition. So it's great to see that this is a focus, a national focus. So yeah. Neat. Well, that's all I have. Just thanking my
So,
sponsors and.
do we have enough of the slash on that to take care of that
94,000 tons of
Yeah.
slash available.
No, we would only ask